Okay, this is Lesson D Part 2, and we're going to start with Lesson 14 in the book. So Lesson D Part 2 has to do with more graphics and effects, and in particular, compositing techniques and titles, graphics overlays. So compositing is a video term which has to do with the combining of several different video layers with each other. And there's different techniques to use to do this. We've seen some before in previous lessons by creating a matte or mask, and that allowed us to punch a hole in a video layer to see what was underneath in another video layer. And we also dissolve between two video layers, and that's also called compositing. And so it's useful to think of video layers as a deck of cards, stacked on top of each other. And in order to see the card underneath, you need to punch a hole in the card that's on top. That's basic understanding of compositing. So compositing is combining multiple video layers together to achieve the effect that we're looking for. So we're going to go ahead and open Lesson 14 in the book. And Lesson 14 on my computer opens up in the full with effects, which is my own setting based on the Beau's layout setting, whereby I have essentially the Beau's layout but with an extra panel on the right, which is where I put my effects. So we're typically going to be looking at effects and the effects panel, and perhaps lumetri color, and then later on some essential graphics as well, which is this panel here, essential graphics. So right now I'm going to just leave it on effects. So I have basically my source monitor here with my project. I always like to keep it to the left here, my project here, my program monitor here, and my timeline down here. So in the timeline there's already a sequence that's opened, which is called Desert Jacket. And if I hit home and then spacebar, you can see that essentially there's this guy standing in front of a shot of the desert. Now, a couple of things real quick. Notice that my playback is at 1/4, which is why it looks kind of fuzzy. I'm going to leave it at that just so for the sake of playing back. Especially when we start doing compositing, that kind of slows down the playback sometimes. But in my timeline, you can see there's two layers of clips. One's on track V2, one's on track V1. If I turn off what's in track V1 by clicking the eyeball here, you can see on track V2 that basically the actor is standing in front of what looks like an empty screen. And that's because I have the transparency grid turned on. If I turn that off, it looks like he's going to be standing in front of black. So obviously he's not standing in front of black, and he's not standing in front of a transparent screen. That's not possible in real life. So if I click on this clip here on track V2, go to effects controls, we have in the effects what's called ultra key. I can collapse that. So you have this effect called ultra key. Now if I turn that effect off by clicking this FX button right here, you can see that in fact the actor was standing in front of a green screen. This is called a green screen. In other words, he's standing in front of green. And what this indicates, this green screen, is it indicates to the editor in post-production that we want to punch a hole in this video wherever it's green. And that's what this ultra key effect is going to allow us to do. If I turn it back on, you can see it punches a hole behind the actor. And if I turn the clip on V1 track back on, you can see whatever's on the track V1 shows through what the green screen was. That's called keying. That's a particular type of keying called chroma keying, which is based on the color here, the color green. It can be different types of colors. And the reason why they choose green is because typically Green's the opposite of skin tone, more or less. Skin tone is more towards the orange. So green is somewhat the opposite of skin tone, since most of the time we're shooting an actor on a green screen. That makes sure that there's a big chroma difference between the background, which is green, and the skin tone, which is orange. And that is a chroma key. There are different types of keys. You can find the keys in the video effects bin under keying. There's alpha, adjust, color key, luma key, track matte, and ultra key. So this is a chroma key, the ultra key. There's another chroma key here called color key. This one's called ultra key because it just has a couple of more parameters that you can adjust. The color key is a little bit more straightforward and simple, but it's also a chroma key. Then you have luma key, and the luma key pulls the key based on the brightness in the image. So it's based on the amount of light in an image. That's what luma means. There's two terms in video that are important to understand. One's luma and one's chroma. They stand for luminance and chrominance. Luminance has to do with the amount of light in a picture, and chrominance has to do with the value of the color. And video is broken into 4 discrete signals. And the 4 discrete signals are RGB, which is red, green, and blue, and alpha. Alpha is what allows us to see this transparent image. Alpha is the amount of opacity per pixel. So each pixel has 4 parameters attached to it. It has a red one, a green one, a blue one, and an alpha. And so the alpha is what is allowing us to pull this key here by saying every pixel that has this green color that we selected, the key color, which is the green that we selected right here, is going to be 100% alpha. In other words, it's going to be 100% transparent or 0% opacity. So, but none of the other pixels are being affected. That's why you can see the actor when you pull the key. So that's called an alpha. Now, a couple of ways I can show you this. Obviously, if I again turn off this V1 track, you can see the alpha through the transparency grid. If I turn the transparency grid, then all you see is black. But I can also show you up here where it says composite video, I can show you the alpha. Now what you're seeing here is the alpha channel. Whatever is white is opaque, whatever is black is transparent. The more contrast your alpha is, the better your key is going to be. But you might be clipping into your image, which would be an undesirable effect. So again, to go over some of these terms here, note that if I want to see the image, I go to what's called composite video. Composite video means all 4 signals, RGB and alpha, are visible. And also it shows you what's behind it, which is obviously the key that shows through on track V1. This is composite video. So a little update on some of the terms. Okay, the alpha channel is this white over black. Anything black is transparent, anything white is opaque. And you have values in between from 0 to 100. That's called the alpha channel. It used to be called the high con or high contrast, which would allow a video editor to also pull a key. So that's called the alpha channel. Composite is when you have the alpha channel and the RGB mixed together, then you can see the image. If I turn off the background layer and then put it in transparency grid, this part of the image, which is just the RGB part of the image, is called the fill. So you've got the key, you've got the fill. Also, we call this a matte, a key matte. This is the fill. In other words, this is what fills in that matte, that key that we're pulling. And this, obviously, is the composite, because it composites 2 layers of video. We have layer on track V1, layer on track V2. Composites 2 layers of video together. So those are some of the post-production video terms that you will hear when talking about compositing layers. An important note on alpha channels. Not all cameras can, well, not all camera settings capture an alpha channel. An alpha channel is a very specific setting, and so it depends what your camera setting is. Not all camera settings, or codecs as they're called, capture an alpha channel. And what that means is sometimes you might have some footage that doesn't key out very well, and that's because the alpha channel was not included when you shot the video. It doesn't mean that there's not a green screen. You can shoot a green screen without having an alpha channel, but your actual codec does not include an alpha channel, which would mean you have to reprocess it and create an alpha channel. Typically, to get a good alpha channel, what you want is what's called pre-multiplied matte, and that comes typically with a codec called QuickTime. So not all video cameras record an alpha channel. In fact, most codecs cannot store an alpha channel. So that means you would have to reconvert the footage to include an alpha channel. And my suggestion is make sure that you convert it to an Apple ProRes codec or any other type of high quality codec, which is going to give you an alpha channel. So we're going to look at this sequence in the timeline of this actor keyed on top of this desert background. In your wrench menu, make sure that you have Show Effects Badges turned on. I just turned mine off. And you also have Show Video Keyframes turned on. I have mine turned off. If they're turned off, your clips will look like this in the timeline. And if I turn video keyframes back on and turn FX badges back on, it will now look like this. So the reason we want to do that is so we can see this line in the middle of the clip. Now, in a previous lesson, I had said that if you go to the Motion tab and you move your, let's say you put a keyframe here, and then you move your clip, you get what I call a rubber band. Now, see, obviously you can move this clip as well. This is a rubber band, okay? And traditional post-production facilities, this is called the rubber band, all right? But Premiere, in their infinite wisdom, has decided to call this bar, this line inside the clip here, a rubber band in the book. I'm not sure why. You can grab this bar and move it up and down, but it does not have the same properties as this, which you can twist and turn like a rubber band. Okay, so I don't know why they would call this a rubber band. Now, in the real world, not the world of programming engineers, the real world of video editing, this is called the automation keyframe line. Basically, it's where you can insert keyframes, sort of like what you can do here with the rubber band effect. You can insert keyframes and you can automate those keyframes. That's what this line is. Now, essentially, on a video track, this line only impacts one keyframe, which is the opacity. So if you go down to the bottom it becomes transparent. And if you pull the bar all the way to the top, then your opacity is back to 100%. You can see that actually. If I go into my opacity tab here, turn on opacity, watch this number. As I pull this bar down, you see it goes down. When I pull it up, it goes up. Okay? But in my book, that's not a rubber band, okay? That's a keyframe automation line. That's the way I call it. That's what I call it. So, but in the book they call it a rubber band, so I'm sorry for the confusion, but that's just, we're gonna have to live with it. Also, up here is what is called the effects badge. And we already saw the effects badge before when we were looking at source clips in the source monitor. Now if I hit, for example, if I hit F, it loads this clip into the source monitor. Now this is the source clip, and if I apply a filter, I know I'm getting a little bit in the weeds here, but if I apply a filter to the source, I just applied a mosaic effect. Now this effects badge gets a red underline. We already saw that before. That's because this is indicating to me that the source clip has an effect applied to it. So I'm gonna get rid of that because I don't want that mosaic effect, even though it's kind of a cool effect. I don't want that on there. That's not what we're actually trying to illustrate here. All I'm trying to illustrate is that these effects badges give you a little bit more information. So if it's gray, like say for example in the track desert scene in V1, that means there's no effect that has been applied. Okay, so I don't know why they would show a badge. If no effect was applied, why is there showing a badge? But anyway, gray means no effect has been applied. Now, if I double click on this clip and if I go into my effects controls, if I click on, well, opacity is good enough. Watch what happens to the effects badge if I lower the opacity. Now, the effects badge is yellow, meaning an effect, and you can see the clip has been dissolved, half dissolved, 2/3 dissolved, so it's become semi-transparent. What that means is that yellow, when the badge is yellow, it means one of your fixed effects, remember your fixed effects are these three: opacity, timer mapping, and motion. Yellow means one of your fixed effects has been applied, and that is opacity in this instance. If I reset it, my badge goes back to gray. Notice in the clip on track V2, the badge is green. And the badge is green because I have a non-fixed effect or non-default effect applied, which is an additive effect, which is Ultra Key, which I got out of my effects bin over here, my effects panel. The Ultra Key is an additive effect. It is not a default effect. So when an additive effect has been applied, you get a green badge. If I turn that off or get rid of it completely, the green badge goes away. My motion, it was showing me a yellow badge because my motion was not reset to default. But anyway, now everything's back to default. You see my green badge is gone. But if I go back and get Ultra Key and drop it back onto this clip, now I have a purple badge. The purple means that you have added an effect, but the effect has not been altered yet. And that is because I added the Ultra Key, but I have not changed any settings yet. We're going to change the settings right now by taking the eyedropper. We're going to grab the green color in our screen here. Okay. And now we have the key, but I'm going to show you something really quick here. We're going to go and adjust some parameters in this at Ultra Key. If I go to zoom in a bit, you can see that even though we've pulled the key, there's a little bit of a green outline around this actor. These are the things that we do with our matte cleanup and our matte generation. And so right here now, we want to sort of maybe increase our tolerance a little bit. You see what happens if I decrease the tolerance? You start to see parts of the green screen here. So if I increase the tolerance, it's going to get rid of more of the green screen. If I go down into matte cleanup, if I do soften a little bit, it's going to soften the edges of this matte. And you see if I can soften it, go way over here to 86, and it's softened it, but you can still see there's a little bit of a line here, and that means I need to do a little bit of a choke. And a little bit of a choke got rid of that extra line. There's other things you can look at, which is spill suppression. So right now this key looks not bad. You can see a little bit of green in here, right here now, in his hands. This is where I'm going to use the spill suppression. And the spill suppression, what that does is it turns, if I turn off the spill suppression, you can see his hands are very green. If I boost the spill suppression way up, you can see that now anything that's green has been turned into a more skin tone type of color. And that's what that spill suppression is. I can also make it darker. That's what this lumen is. If I pull it, I can make it darker, or I can make it brighter if I wanted to. This is up to you. I would have, it was at 50, I'd put it probably, yeah, maybe 60 around here type of thing. Yeah, desaturate means I take out the color information completely, which we obviously don't want to do. So I'm going to leave the desaturate at 0. You can see now that I'm going to take this range down a little bit. I have to be careful because this is applying the spill suppression to the entire image. So I'm actually applying a color effect to this image, which is not entirely desirable. So I just have to be careful and make it a little bit orange there so that it gets rid of my green. Okay, so this key is better, obviously, but I think it's still a little bit soft. I'm going to go to my full, and I'm going to turn on view high quality playback. That's very important when you're pulling keys, and pause resolution. I'm going to put that on full as well. You can see there's a little bit of green here still. I can get rid of that with some more spill suppression. If I increase the range, yeah, I got to be very careful here because then he starts to get orange. So I got rid of that green there. All right. The soften, I have a lot of soften on there. So you notice that soften is actually cutting into the image if I put it at 100. And choke also does that. So if I go choke, you see how I'm cutting into the image? So we have to be careful with this. But by adjusting all these different parameters, I've come to something that's pretty decent. Let's go ahead and open in the project lesson the theft unexpected sequence, which is inside the sequences bin. We already looked at the desert jacket one. We're going to look at the theft unexpected one now. I'm going to hit backslash just to open it up a little bit. And you have I'm going to shrink these, certainly shrink the volume one. You can see the effects badge on all these clips. The effects badge is gray, which means no effect has been applied. Now, the effects badge on here is also gray. If I go to my effects control, that's because no effect has been applied. However, we are able to see through this clip. Why is that? That's because this clip has an inherent alpha channel that was created, in this case, if I do a reveal in project, when we created this PNG came in with an alpha channel. So that's why we can see through the background here. So if I load it into the source monitor, you can see it has a transparent background. And that is because I'm looking at my transparency grid. If I turn my transparency grid off, it has a black background. If I want to see the alpha, I turn the alpha. The alpha shows you what's transparent and what's opaque. So we're going to zoom in the timeline a little bit, do a couple of pluses here with my playhead over that theft unexpected clip. I'm going to shrink this layer a little bit, and I'm going to expand this layer a little bit. Okay, so we want to focus on this automation, keyframe automation line, or the rubber band as they call it, unfortunately, in the book. And we're going to adjust the opacity effect inside this clip. Now, we could do that by going to the effects control and inserting keyframes here with the stopwatch and changing the opacity here, but we're going to do it in the timeline. I'm going to go to the beginning of that clip, which is going to be, do a couple of up arrows, and I'm going to select Control, and I'm going to click on that rubber band or automation keyframe timeline. And I'm going to put 2 keyframes at the beginning and 2 keyframes at the end. It doesn't matter where you put them, but by holding the control button, it allows you to put in keyframes. Now I'm going to let go of the control button. Notice in my opacity tab, I now have 4 keyframes, right? If I expand this tab, you can see the keyframes. I could adjust them here by navigating between the different keyframes and adjusting their values, but I'm going to do it down here inside the timeline. I'm going to grab that first keyframe and I'm going to drag it all the way down to the bottom corner of the clip. And that means that opacity is going to be at 0. I'm going to do that with the last keyframe as well. Pull it down all the way down to the bottom of the clip. Now, if I play this clip back by hitting spacebar, watch what happens. The title fades up and fades out. I created basically a opacity animation by introducing these keyframes and moving them by hand. So this is just to show you, and you can adjust how slow it dissolves up and how long it stays up for. It dissolves up slowly, it dissolves down slowly. By introducing keyframes manually using the control button. So another way to do composites is to use blend modes. We're going to use a different title here just for the sake of doing a blend mode. So in the graphics, we're going to look for Theft Unexpected Layer. Now, remember to replace a shot. The quick way to do it is to grab this clip here, Theft Unexpected Layered. It's a still, but we'll treat it as a clip. Drag it down on top of the clip you want to replace it with. Hold the Alt button. That replaces the old clip with the new title, and it keeps the dissolves at the beginning and the dissolves at the end. It keeps all the graphics and filters effects that we have already applied to that clip, which is a very convenient way to do a quick swap on a clip. So we've swapped that title out. Now if I click on this clip and I go to Effect Controls, I still have my opacity keyframes that I laid down manually. We're going to collapse this, but what I want to look at now is this, which is called the blend mode. Now in the blend mode, there are a lot of different types of blends that we can do. And the blending of the two layers happens in different kinds of ways. Each blend mode applies a different sort of algorithm to the pixels and combines the layer above with the layer underneath, or layers underneath. In this case, there's several clips here in different ways. So let's try out a couple of different ones. If I do multiply, for example, first I have to make sure I select it. It kind of just dissolves it a little bit. If I do color dodge, it kind of does this. Remember, my graphic might look a little bit different from yours because we changed it. I think this was in lesson C. We changed the graphic around a little bit, and I saved the changed one, so that's why it looks different. And we can do a bunch of different types of blend modes until we get one that, you know, looks kind of okay. The lighten mode does this. So if I play it down, and now it looks...
Is this seat taken?
Like it fades up and fades down, and you can kind of see through kind of the darker areas, etc. We can just keep on trying different ones. Difference is kind of a neat one because it sort of anything that passes under the logo becomes reversed. Divide gives us a really strange effect, but this is perhaps not the best example. So I'm going to show you another way to use blend modes. I want to go ahead and save this project lesson. Save as work in progress 1. And I'm going to actually open a version of lesson 14 that I already created using some other graphics just to illustrate this a little bit better. So you're not going to have these graphics, so just follow along. I could probably upload them for you, and I might do that, and we can take a look at that. So I'm going to look here at this particular clip, and we're going to do a little bit of compositing using this clip. This is one of the clips I use for one of my lessons. Obviously, to save it's your project pretty straightforward. There's a green screen, and we're going to key something behind the green screen. So it's in this folder called Beau's Build, and I have a couple of things that I'm going to use. First of all, we're going to key out this green screen. So I can click on this, go to Effects Controls, and you can see that there's already an Ultra key applied. But I haven't set the color for it yet. So if I go here with the eyedropper and set the color, now it's keying out everything that was green. And I can turn on the transparency grid, and you can see it's a very clean green screen. And that's because this green screen was made using AI, which actually made it very clean. I don't have to do any other types of adjustments here. Everything else is just pretty much at the default values, and I'm going to leave it like that. but I want to put something behind it. So I need to go down into my timeline, and I need to create a track underneath track V1, because that's the track my clip is on. Now I can go and right click and add tracks, or I can simply do, with the clip selected, Alt up arrow. I'm going to do 2 up arrows. That's going to basically create 2 tracks underneath this track that has a clip in it. So that's what I need. I needed 2 tracks underneath. I'm going to do Shift Command A to deselect everything. I'm going to go back to my project lesson 14 Work in Progress 2, and I'm going to put these 2 graphics here. I'm going to double click on this first graphic, and it shows you what it is. It's just basically a color background with a little bit of a fade here. I'm going to close out project lesson 1. I don't need that in here anymore. So if I double click on the second background, though, you can see there's a little pattern here. So I'm going to lay both of those backgrounds in. The first background is the one I want to lay first, just this color dissolve here. I want to lay it on track V1. We're not dealing with audio, so I could just lock that track. I don't even need it anymore. And I'm going to just do an overwrite. That's going to lay in my track right here. V1 is going to lay in this first Beau's background clip. Now I'm going to select V2, and I'm going to go get the second background, and I'm going to go to my sequence, hit home, and hit period, and that's going to lay in the second graphic on top. So now if I put my playhead over this build here, you can see that I can see this graphic behind where the key was. So that's sort of where we want to be, but I actually want to add one more effect. So I'm going to select this Beau's background on Beau's background 1 on track V2, and notice these are targets, TGAs, and targets are a good bet to use when you're doing stills and video. They just have they're just more video friendly. And if I double click on this and load it into my effects controls panel, go to effects control, I'm going to go to my opacity, and we're going to use a blend mode here. And I'm going to go, I can try different blend modes out. If I do color burn, it does nothing. It just kind of, you can see the result over here. I'm going to get rid of some stuff here. I'm going to get rid of my transport controls. I don't really need them. And so that now I have a little bit more room here. Color burn doesn't do much. I can go into screen. Now screen kind of makes it all kind of lighter, a little bit lighter. I could try some other ones out, but the one that I settled on is luminosity. And luminosity gives me both backgrounds kind of composited together. This is a composite. This is a 3-layer composite, actually. And I can now see the colored, nice color gradient plus the pattern on top. And that's what I really was looking for this effect. Now, of course, the effect stops when the clips stop. So I can, if I go back into my keyboard shortcuts, my E is set to extend selected. So if I select my sequence, go to end, then select the last bit of this clip and hit E, it's going to extend it all the way to the end, and do it to the next one. And now my effect extends over the whole video clip. So that is a better sort of use of the blend mode. In this instance, I use the blend to blend that color gradient with this pattern to get a nice result. Okay, let's go into the project lesson 14, you're going to have this material, so you can follow along here. And in the green screen bin, I want you to grab this one. We used the first one, we want to use this one, which is a guy looking at his watch. So on the green screen bin, we want to make a sequence from this clip that fits the actual settings of this clip. And a way to do that, a quick way to do that, is to drag it down, click on the clip, drag it down to the new item button. You see a little plus sign comes up, and then let go, and it created a sequence that fits this clip exactly, that has the exact same sequence settings as this clip, and it drops the clip in on track V1. So that's a very convenient way of creating a sequence that matches a particular clip. If I double click on the header for the track, that'll make the track taller, and so now we can see the effects badge. We're going to select this clip, and remember what I did previously. Alt up arrow is going to drop that clip onto the V2 track, and we'll go ahead and also double click on that to make it taller. And I'm going to hit home, and I'm going to go get another clip in the shots bin, which is the Seattle skyline targa, and that's this. It's a still, and we're going to drop that on track V1. So remember how to do it. Make sure track V1 is patched in, and all we have to do is hit period, and then we can select the last frame of that clip, hit end and hit E, and that extends the clip all the way to the end. So now we have our Seattle skyline clip underneath this green screen shot. However, we can't see it because we haven't pulled the key yet. So we're going to go get the keyer, which is the Ultra key. It's already open here in my effects panel. And if I select the clip that I want to key, all I need to do is double click on this Ultra key. That loads it into my effects controls, and here it is right here. And so now we're going to select with the eyedropper the green part of the screen to key out. The basic way is to just take the eyedropper and select the green. A better way is if you want to select more than just one pixel, and I'll tell you why that's important. Hold the control key while you're eyedropping. Matter of fact, look at the eyedropper, how it gets bigger when you hold the control key. Hold the control key and then hit the eyedropper. That selects more than one pixel. That selects a group of surrounding pixels. And what that does is it allows you to average out your color a little bit better. And that's important when pulling green screens, because your green screens are typically not completely flat and completely the same value all the time. So now we've applied our key right there, and we can see that the Seattle skyline behind the actor, but there's still some stuff going on here. We can see that there's a little bit of a white outline there. If I zoom in, you can see a little bit better. So we're going to work on that. If I want to see my key better than in this composite view, I can select my output to show me the alpha channel. And this way I can see where my problem areas are. You can see it's a little bit fuzzy here and a little bit fuzzy there. What we want to do here is change the key setting. We want the setting to be a little bit more tight. And we have 4 options. One's default, and then relax, aggressive, and custom. We're going to select aggressive, and watch what that does to the contrast in this picture. You see how it tightened it up already? If I go back to my composite, it looks like I got rid of my white line. It's still a little bit fuzzy underneath here. It's probably not very noticeable, but if I go back to my alpha channel and I go down here into some of these other parameters, I can go to my matte cleanup here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to boost the contrast. And you can see as I boost the contrast, I get rid of this little problem area. So that's pretty good. Now if I look at my key composite in composite mode, that looks pretty good. As a matter of fact, that's very clean. There's just a little bit of an outline here, which you could get rid of by maybe softening this up a bit. So I'm going to go to my soften parameter here, and you see how I got rid of that line. Just put it at 25%. So now if I go back to fit here to show, I've got a pretty good key. It's pretty convincing. I would need to do some color correction to blend him better with the background. We applied the green screen to this shot, but we obviously have a problem with these black bars on either side. This is typical of a green screen shoot. Sometimes you don't have a studio big enough. You just want to make sure that your actor is in the shot and that your actor is basically surrounded by green. The shot might not fit entirely into your sequence settings, and rather than zoom into the shot and make this shot bigger, we're going to crop these black bars away using a mask tool. Go into the opacity tab here in the effects control window. And remember with Andrea Sweeney, we use the square. If we click on the square mask, you can see that it creates a mask where we can see the actor, but we don't see the black bars. They're over here. So we can now take the edges of this mask and just drag them to where the black bars are and easily cut these black bars out of the shot. This is called creating a garbage mask or a garbage matte. I use the words mask and matte sort of interchangeably. But this is a quick way to create a garbage matte which is cutting out our black bars on either side of the picture. And now we have our actor who is keyed out, plus we've gotten rid of the black bars on either side of the picture. So now we have essentially what we wanted, which is the actor in front of the shot of the Seattle skyline. Now, of course, I would go in here and color correct this to match this shot better, but that's something we'll look at in a different lesson. It's something to keep in mind when you are doing green screen, is that you're going to have to match into your shot, whatever your background shot is going to be. So keep that in mind in terms of lighting. The light needs to come from the same direction. The shadows need to work appropriately. So those are all things that we need to keep in mind when we're doing a green screen. Okay, we're going to do another compositing effect that's pretty cool. It's a good way to use titles and create a nice effect for titles. So in this timekeeping sequence, select the top clip and just hit delete. So that gets rid of the guy looking at his watch. And I'm going to go into the project lesson and look for shot Laura 06. And that's essentially the shot of her dress. And there's a reason why the author of the book wanted us to pick this. It's not the best example, but we're going to go ahead and do it quickly, and then I'll show you a better example that I created myself. So route this clip to track V2, hit home, and go ahead and hit period. That's going to drop the clip on top. And so now it sort of doesn't make sense. So we have this dress clip on top of the Seattle skyline. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and shrink both of these tracks a little bit. And now I'm going to select track V3. And on track V3, I'm going to go get, in graphics, this title called Seattle. And I'm going to hit home in my timeline. Select your timeline, hit home. With your track V3 selected, hit period. And now I can extend these edits by selecting the last frame of the edit, hitting end and E. Oh, I cannot extend it anymore because this is a clip that has limited amount of footage. You see, I'm using the entire length of the clip. So I can't extend that anymore, but I can extend the Seattle clip out. What I will do is I'm going to go back one arrow and I'm going to extend it backwards. You see, you can extend backwards as well. So now my build looks like this. So why would I do this? Why do I have the Seattle on top of the dress? It doesn't make any sense. Let's go get the track matte key, which is right here above the Ultra key in the effects bin. And we're going to apply it to the lower clip. So let's just drag it down and drop it on the lower clip, which is this purple clip here. Double click on that, go to my effects controls. Here's my track matte key effect. And now we're going to change which video signal we're using for our matte. The track matte key makes a key out of any one of these video signals or video tracks that you select. Any track that's above it is going to be available to select. So we're going to select track V3 and watch what happens. Now we created a matte and a fill and a key where, and again, this example is not very good, but I'm just doing it because it's the one that's in the book, whereby the word Seattle is filled with the pattern of the dress. Again, this is not great, but essentially it's just using the track matte key. Let's look at a better one. All right, here is a little video, beginning of a video that I did of a band. And I use the same track matte effect for the name of the band. Okay, I'm going to show you how to do that. So here's my band elements. By the way, I'm going to make this lesson 14 work in progress 2 with these extra graphics in them available to you as a download so that you can do these examples that I posted as well. So I created a little edit here with all these different layers. So I'm going to make these tracks just a little bit bigger so for the sake of being able to see them. I'll zoom in a little bit. Here we go. Okay. My video layer is on track V2. This is the video of the band playing. This is an edit that I already did previously. So this is essentially the video of the band playing. Note it already has some light effects on it and everything. This is the video on track V3 of, I'll turn off track V1 just so you can see it, of the title. There's the title. Now it's on the checkerboard background. If I turn off this transparency grid, you can now see the title. If I double click on this clip, the title clip, Oh, it's telling me Legacy Tyler will retire in 2022. Yeah, that's true. The new version of Adobe Premiere 2023 does not use the same type interface. So, but we're not going to get into that. Here's my type interface. So I created this title in my title interface. And I laid it down, and with the effects controls, I created a motion animation here. You can see that there's one, two, three, 4 keyframes right here in this static band type layer. You can also see the rubber band. If I zoom out a little bit, there's my rubber band. Now, you know I can mess with my rubber band. Matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and do that. I don't know what that's going to do animation-wise, but it's making it float up a little bit in the picture and float down. We'll leave it. We'll see what it does. So I created an animation with this type layer. And you can see the type layer basically looks like it's over black, and that's because it has an alpha channel. And I'm looking at the alpha right now. If I turn on my transparency grid, you could see there's nothing behind it. My type is white over black. Underneath on the last layer, I have this, which is a clip that I sped up and then I'm using underneath as my fill layer. I'm going to go into my motion tab and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. Maybe 150 will probably be the right size. And you can see that I also sped it up to 185. That's why it's playing fast like this. But really what I want, I just want it for the texture and the pattern, especially in the beginning here. All right. That's why that's there. So, I'm going to turn on all my layers now. And except for the color matte layer. So I'm going to select my video layer, which is the layer that's got the video of the band. You can't see it because it's under the color matte and the static band logo. I'm going to take track matte and I'm going to drop that onto here. And now I'm going to select as my track matte source video 3, which is the name of the band. Now you can't see anything because I still have my color matte on top. If I turn off my color matte, now you can see that the name of the band is punching a hole in the video. But I've got it reversed here. I have what I wanted to use as my fill on the outside and what I wanted to use as my background on the inside. So I'm going to hit reverse, and that's going to give me the result that I wanted. Now, this is pretty good in terms of giving me the animation of the type on top of the band. Well, I wanted to add a little bit more punch to it. And that's where I went and got my color matte. So let me turn on the color matte on top. That's why I laid a color matte on top. And if I go into my opacity tab, I click on the color matte clip. Notice I had turned it off. If I turn it back on, you can see that it made a bar there. And that is because I have a mask. And with the mask, you see I put the mask over, what I wanted to do is I want to put the mask over where the static band font animates. And then I want to change the opacity to color burn. And now you can see that I've got an effect, and I've actually created a dissolve up and a dissolve down with my keyframes, so that that doesn't dissolve up until the logo appears, and then it dissolves away. Remember, I added that little animation. So that's pretty good, but that's probably not entirely what I want. So I'm going to try a different blend mode. I'm going to try overlay. And now overlay gives me this effect. So because now I introduced a little floating movement on the logo, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. I think that was this keyframe. So now it just slides across. And that means in my color matte, I have to adjust the mask of the color matte. Just select mask and drop it down to here. And the color mask dissolves up and dissolves down. And so now if I play my effect, it does this. So that was an example of how to use compositing to achieve a good result. I felt I had to do that simply because I thought the example in the book was just really lackluster. And I wanted to show you that you could really achieve some really nice effects using compositing, using your opacity blend layers, your mask tools. These are basic tools. We're not even getting too complicated with our effects here. We're just basically applying some simple tools to achieve a really nice effect doing compositing. Now, remember, think of your video layers as layers of video stacked on top of each other, like cards, like a deck of cards. You can punch holes, you can look through them. You can obviously punch holes that don't have to be square or circular. You can punch holes using a green screen. There's a ton of ways of combining all the different layers of video to achieve great effects. We're going to look at creating graphic title effects next. And in combination with what we've already learned, you're going to be equipped to do a really wide array of very, very useful and very, very interesting effects. So let's move on to lesson 15. Okay, so let's go ahead and open lesson 15. Now, in this lesson, we're going to look at how to make graphics and titles and basic moving shapes, motion graphics. Very useful, and actually in this lesson, a lot of useful tools are going to be explored. I would have to say that this is where Adobe really has made a big effort and come up with some really great solutions to making graphics. So let's go ahead and explore these tools. In the program monitor, there are things you can do right away using your basic tool set on the left-hand side here. If you go get the type tool, for example, which the shortcut for is T, and you click in the program monitor, you can immediately start to type, which is pretty amazing. Well, undo that. If you go get your pen tool, you can immediately start to create shapes, which is also amazing. And with your select tool, you can move these shapes around. Very, very quick access to a lot of graphics tools here. I'm just undoing everything here. You also have some pre-built shapes. For example, rectangle. If you drop down, you've got your ellipse. And of course, I can give these different colors. I go select my V tool. And if I right-click on this ellipse, I go to Edit Properties. And now I have, on the right-hand side of the screen, in my graphics interface, I've got a panel called Essential Graphics. And inside my Essential Graphics, all I have to do is click on this fill here, and I can change this to a blue shape, and I can move it. Very, very convenient. I can even make it transparent or semi-transparent. I can rotate it, or I can rotate it by hand if I want to. And of course, it can be animated. If I go into my effects controls, there's the shape. And it can be animated as well. I can also change the appearance here in the effects controls panel, or I can continue to manipulate it. And of course, give it keyframes, which will then allow me to create an animation. Position, and we move it to another position. There's my rubber band. Oh, I could select the other shape as well. I'm trying to select the rubber band. There's my rubber band. And you notice I've got these red lines here that keep popping up. That's because I have grid turned on, which is Snap in Program Monitor. We'll see that in a second. But basically, I can go get another shape, which is a polygon shape here, and change the color to red, for example, and change the amount of sides my polygon has right here. You see? Select my V tool, move it around, spin it if I need to spin it. So these are really, really useful tools, and they're all right there available in your toolbar and editable right directly in the program monitor through the Essential Graphics panel over here to the right. So in the sequence called 01 Clouds, we just created our own graphic. I'm going to push it over to the side a little bit here. This is the graphic we just created. Notice that what happens is when you create your shapes here, shape 1, 2, and 3, they get created inside a clip. If I click on this clip and I go over to my effects panel, my effects control panel, look what I have in my effects control panel. Shape 1, 2, and 3. They're under what's called vector clip. A vector clip is a little bit different than a normal clip. You see, I still have my default effects down here, but on top I have vector effects now. And I can change all these different parameters of my shapes. These are called vector shapes. And what vector shapes means is basically I can alter these shapes and zoom in, make them as big or as little as I want without ever losing any resolution along the edges of the shapes simply because it's a vector. A vector is a digital file that is created differently from a picture file. I can also give these shapes names. So for example, in here, my essential graphics, I can click on the name here and call it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hexagon. I can select the ellipse, call that ellipse, and the rectangle, and call that rectangle. And so now, each one of my layers, you see them here in the effects control panel, has a name. So very, very convenient. And that's right at your fingertips, directly in the program monitor using the tools and the essential graphics panel. So let's look at this sequence 01 clouds. Let's look at the graphics clip that they created. It's the one called Cloudscape. With my playhead positioned over the clip here, I just need to click it once. I can go into my program monitor here. And if I click on the word Cloudscape with my V tool, my selection tool enabled, it immediately shows me the layer, and it's a text layer. Now, all the text attributes pop up here in my text layer. I can change the font here. I'm looking at an Arial font, but I could go get any other type of font. I have a bunch of different fonts loaded that you probably don't have, but for example, I could change it to this font. I could also make it bigger just by dragging it. By doing Control A, I can select the whole text layer, and then I can change the color of the font. Let's see, change it to yellow. I can also change the position in this align and transform area. I can change it like this. I can rotate it, of course. I showed you that already. Note that with text, the anchor point is on the edge of the text. I would just put that back to 0. I can enlarge it or shrink it, and I can also make it semi-transparent if I want to. If I want to deselect the text in the program monitor, Shift-Command-A. I could still move the layer, make sure I have my V selection tool selected, but let's see what happened there. I actually typed V. I need to go down to my tool and grab it like this. And otherwise, I'm going to end up typing inside that text. Now, just to show you really quick, I'm going to close this panel here. So let's say you're in your normal type of layout and you want to edit some text. Nothing's selected here. You can quickly go, even if nothing at all is selected, you can quickly go to your program monitor, click on the text, click once to select it, and then right-click to go Edit Properties. And if I hit Edit Properties, it immediately brings up Essential Graphics. Now, all the changes that I make inside Essential Graphics get updated in the Effects Control panel. And here's the text layer. Note that the fill is now yellow and the size has been changed. And it's also semi-transparent. And all these parameters get updated, and they can all be animated as well with keyframes. So that's super, super convenient. Now, let's say in the Essential Graphics panel, I deselect all the layers. By the way, there's 2 layers because the second layer is the bar here underneath the word Cloudscape. And also, I can change the color on that. Let's make it green. And the transparency, and the position, and the size, for example. But notice, in the program monitor, I clicked away from my two shapes here. And in the Essential Graphics panel, you can do the same by clicking in the empty space here. So the two layers are deselected. But because graphics all get compiled into one, or you could say composited into one graphics layer, any transform that I apply here applies to the entire graphics clip. So that's also extremely convenient. So not only do I have access to each particular graphic inside the graphics build, and this is why I'm going to call this a graphics build now, I also have the ability to transform the entire graphics build, which is super, super convenient. And if I go to my effects vector motion here, I can move the entire graphics build right here using keyframes, for example. You see? These are essentially my transforms that are over here, but they come up as keyframes here. So for example, now I've got a rubber band here that I can alter if I want for this particular shape. And this behaves as its own clip, even though it's an entire graphics build. So that's another great, great tool. Very convenient. Adobe's really outdone themselves here. I think that this is where the software really shines. As much as I criticize some of the editing features, in terms of the graphics features, they've done amazingly well here. In the Essential Graphics tab panel, there are two tabs. One is the Edit tab, which is the tab that we've been working in. The other is the Browse tab. If you go to the Browse tab, what you'll see is a bunch of pre-builds. And the pre-builds, you can drag them into your sequence, and you see what the pre-builds do is they have, you know, I've got my graphics on top of here. Actually, I could change the order of these two, like this, to make it look like I'm actually building a movie intro. How neat is that? And this is all so quick. You see? So that's a pre-build. This graphic is a pre-build, but it comes in as well as an editable graphic, editable graphic inside this new text panel when I click on it. And the text panel just makes all these areas changeable. So if I want to change the wording here, all I need to do is double click in these different areas. And I can click on a box and do Control A, that selects the entire box. If I just click and put the cursor in one position, then I can continue typing there. But let's just say I want to select this Company Presents box. I select it and then do Control A, and now I can retype my own text. And also I can alter the text. I can make it bigger. Is this a size? No, that's not the size. The size is this one here. And I can change the color, you know, all the stuff I just showed you a minute ago. And it's just amazingly easy to, I need to, pardon me, I need to select the text and then I can go change the color. And there you go. Shift Command A, Shift Control A. And now if I play my graphic, if I go down to my timeline, remember, so this is something to watch out for. If you got text selected in the program monitor like this, you can't use your keyboard shortcuts. So watch out for that, because otherwise you're going to start typing stuff. And I could just, if I enable track V2, just play it back. And there you go. There's my Dizzy Presents. Very, very quick. Okay, so we're going to go to the project window real quick. And in the Assets bin, we're going to open the Assets bin. We're going to look for the clip called White Cloudscape. So we've already got Cloudscape loaded, but we're going to look for White Cloudscape. If I click on that, that's a Targa file. And we're going to drop that down. I'm going to go to my timeline by hitting H, hit my backslash. And I'm going to drop it at the beginning of the sequence, so I'm going to hit home. And what I want to do is I want to grab that empty space right here. So I'm just going to do X. With my V2 track selected and my V1 track deselected, if I hit X, it's going to grab this empty space. And I'm going to drop this Cloudscape clip down on V2, so I have to route it here. Right there. I'm going to just put fit to fill. I actually didn't put fit to fill, but anyway, it's there. Okay, so now that graphic is on top of my clouds. Now, if I hit T to select my graphics type tool, T is a keyboard shortcut to select the type tool, and in my Cloudscape, I click in between the words cloud and scape. I can start typing. I just did some spaces there. And I can start aligning it and moving it around using the transform tools. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a little bit of work on the type layout. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at some stuff specifically pertaining to type. For example, we're going to look at kerning. That's what this little box is here. Actually, this is the tracking. Here's the kerning right here. If you hover over it, it'll tell you what it is. And the kerning, if I move the kerning here and set it to 300, for example, you see it moved the second half of the word over. And that is kerning between two letters. You could do it between any other two letters. Oops. I have to select my kerning tool here, 300. And I could do it between each one of these letters here. Now, it's a bit annoying to have to reselect your kerning tool each time. But if you just click on your right or left arrows, it'll bring you into your text layer in the program monitor. And now I'm simply using my left and right arrows to navigate between the different letters. And I'm adjusting my kerning manually like this by clicking right here on the V/A tool. I'm not sure what V/A stands for, but I'm sure someone will find out and let me know. Okay, so now I've kerned it, and you can see it's kind of off center here, so we're going to recenter it, and you can do it by clicking on these position, align, and transform boxes, or you can also center it using the paragraph layout center align text, and then center it this way. These align transform buttons allow you to do a bunch of different things like this. I'll let you explore that on your own time, but essentially there I kerned my cloud skateboard one letter at a time. So you have a bunch of text editing tools here. This one is leading, and if I select that and do 300, what happens? Nothing, because I don't think I had my text layer selected. I need to first do a Control A. Actually, I did a back arrow and then a Control A to select my text layer. And now, if I put 200 here and enter, what happens? You see, it actually spreads out all the letters. So I can write 400, and it spreads them all out evenly. So that's what the leading does. It spreads out all the letters evenly, and the kerning spreads out letters, adjacent letters, one at a time. So I'm not going to get into there's a bunch of other stuff you can do. This is the, I forgot what this is called. What is this called? Oh, this is called the leading. No, my cursor's too big. Yeah, that was called the tracking, what I just did. This is called the leading. Anyway, this is all type layout stuff. You can make your type, give it a italicized, you can make it bold, underlined, etc. These are all type editing tools that are pretty normal type of tools. So we're going to move on. I just wanted to show you that. If I go back to my Dizzy Presents here and select my graphics layer, which is underneath the type layer, which is the Dizzy Presents, and I go to my essential graphics, notice the order of my three objects. I will call these objects because they are vector objects, and they're inside my clip layer, my graphics layer, and these are called objects, vector objects. The order matters. So if I take my hexagon and drag it underneath my ellipse, now my hexagon is underneath my ellipse. So the order of this layout here in the Essential Graphics Edit tab matters. Also, I have these little eyeballs which allow me to make a graphic invisible if I wanted the graphic to be invisible. So those are a couple of little more editing features inside the Edit tab of the Essential Graphics panel. I'm going to save this lesson as lesson 15, work in progress 1. I'm actually going to go ahead and open a lesson that I already made, or a variation on this lesson that I already made, which is work in progress 02, because I wanted to show you how to build this little graphics build. It's very simple, and I will include this in the downloadable format for you guys if you want. But this is extremely simple. But I wanted to show you how useful these tools were. So without getting into it too much, I just wanted to quickly show you what I did. Here's my graphics layer. Or if I double click it here, it loads into the Essential Graphics. And you can see I essentially made a bunch of different shapes, and I just did these with my pen tool. Here's an amoeba. I could go ahead and alter this. I'll go get my V tool, I can make it bigger. Or actually, let's see if I can actually, yeah, if I get my pen tool, I can actually change the shape of it, which is, see if I can do this. Let's see if I'm good enough to do this. I'm trying to make, yeah, that's a better shape. Trying to make kind of like a boomerang shape. There we go. Good enough. And then when I go and reselect my V tool, now I can move this around. And if I go into my effects control, I can scrub it through the timeline like this, and I could set, this is my shape amoeba right here. Open my shape amoeba. The appearance, I'll leave the color green, which is very jarring, but at least it's visible. And I'll animate position and rotation. Let's do that. So for the starting position, I'll just drag it over here. And then I'll scrub through the clip and I get to the end of the clip and I'll just drag it over here. And I'll rotate it a couple of times. So now if I play it back, it's going to do this. Pretty silly, right? That's how easy it is to animate shapes with this new Essential Graphics tool that Adobe has created here. Now I could go get my other shapes. I basically have a rectangle, and I just created that as well. And I did, if I click on the rectangle, it'll show me here in the effects control panel. I can close this amoeba shape. Remember, Alt click on these arrows closes everything. And then I can just open the rectangle. And the rectangle, there's a little animation here. I did a scale animation from 0 to 100 and a rotation animation. And I could go over here and make this rectangle semi-transparent if I wanted. It's also got a drop shadow on it. Note, the drop shadow I just created here. And I made a brownish red drop shadow. Let's change that to blue, a dark blue. There we go. Super easy. So now I've got these two shapes. If I go back up to my effects, Essential Graphics, and I turn on my triangle. I made a triangle shape. Really, no big deal. And the same thing, I just animated it. Go over to my effects control here again. Alt, click, show, closes everything. Here's my triangle shape. And again, my triangle just has a position animation here. If I click on that, you can see the animation. If I click on my triangle shape, it's going to show me my keyframes right here. I've got a little rotation as well. There's no scale keyframes, but, and I did the same with a circle. Here's a circle. And I did the same with another shape, which I called Cheetos, because it looks like a little Cheetos. That's a snack in America. And there's my shapes. Super simple. So the Cheetos has got a little weird animation. That's because if I click on this Cheetos animation here, again, Alt, click, close everything. Here's my Cheetos animation. You can see that I did some weird stuff with the Bezier curves. Let's take a look here. there's this weird keyframe, and you can see my Bezier curves here. I did some weird stuff. I could click on this and just undo all the Bezier, just make it linear. And let's see what happens now. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Notice my rubber bands all appear. They're all here. I could still move this around on the screen with my rubber bands. Super convenient. And then finally, I added a text layer here. Here's a font here called Acre. Now that's not included in your Adobe fonts, neither is it included in your default Premiere Pro package. So if I just click on this in the text box down here in the Essential Graphics panel, if I click on the text box, I have an option to click on Add Adobe Fonts. If I click on Add Adobe Fonts, it's going to go to the Adobe website where you can add a bunch of free fonts. Some of them are not free, but anyway, you can visit the website and there's a bunch of different fonts here. And you can add, for example, fonts from the Adobe font collection. I'm not going to sign in here. I'm not going to do that, but that's basically where you can add fonts. So that's very useful because there's a lot of fonts that you can add. I just animated this font. Well, I'll just play it down and show you what it does. It just slides in from the left, from the right. And I gave this font a nice yellow color here. I gave it a nice outline here using stroke. I put it at 27. And I gave it a shadow. And then I just animated it. You can see the font animates from left to right. Here's my text. It just animates from left to right, that's all. There's my animation, my two keyframes. So you can create graphics like this super easy. It's very easy to create builds, graphics builds. And these graphics are all in one vector layer. You see? This vector layer is called vector motion. That's the entire build. It's called 1980s graphic. And it all lives underneath this vector motion tab. All the different layers that I can animate independently. It's a good idea to give your layers names. You do that just by clicking here and renaming them. See, so now my Aniba is called rename. So basically, that's how you can create shapes, create really quick animations using your Essential Graphics tab, your pen tool, your shapes tool, and your text tool in Essential Graphics. Super easy and super convenient. One thing I really wanted to show you very quickly was also online. Adobe has something else that's very convenient. This is really great. This is a color picker, or it's just basically, it gives you a lot of information regarding colors. It tells you what their hexadecimal code numbers are, which is, if you're designing a website, is very, very convenient. It also tells you a bunch of things. What are the complementary colors? So for example, what's the complementary to green? Well, it's orange. You could say the complementary to this color is this color, you see? And then it gives you all the steps in between. So the complementary to this yellow is this blue, purple blue. So very, very convenient. This is a very neat website to explore. It has a lot of really good color ideas that you can test out. And so I would suggest exploring it and getting some really neat design ideas by looking at the different color options that you could get at this website, color.adobe.com. So creating text is very easy. If you go into your project lesson window and load the sequence called 02 Cliff, there's a clip of clouds over rocks here. And if you want to create text on top of that, I just placed my playhead in the middle here. All you need to do is type T. T selects your text button, your text tool, and then in a program monitor, all you need to do is click once, and then you could start writing text. Pretty amazing. Now it remembers the style that I was using for this graphic, but we can change that. We'll change that in a second. And if I want to move it, I just need to select my V tool. Oh, remember, when you're in your text tool, you can't use your keyboard shortcuts. Otherwise, they're going to type letters instead of pulling your shortcuts. One thing I want to show you, we already saw this earlier, but you notice these little red lines when I pull my title around? Very convenient. It allows me to center it. This is in the View menu. Snap in Program Monitor. I can also show rulers. We already saw this. And I can also pull guides. Remember, we already saw this. And then it'll snap to my guides, you see? This is very convenient when you're doing graphics like this. So all this is available to you. And if I want to edit this type, I just need to double click on it. Or I can do Control A. Shift Control A deselects it. Control A selects it. And let's say I just want to change the color of the fill. Now I can change the color here with my color picker, or I can go get my eyedropper and I can select, so I'll cancel the color picker, get my eyedropper, select a color from within the video. And now I've matched into my video. Or I could select the blue if I wanted. Again, I have to do Control A. Select the blue if I want it. Shift Control A. That's pretty neat. I could change the stroke. Let's say this time we'll make the stroke yellow. Again, I forgot to select my type by doing Control A. I can use yellow. Shift Control A. It's not bad. Or I could use my eyedropper, Control A, eyedropper, and grab the white from the cloud, Shift Control A. Now notice what it did inside the sequence. It created a type clip. All my text lives inside this clip. And I can move this clip around. I can put it anywhere I need to put it. I can even extend it, stretch it. Great way to create titles. The title, Big Rock, shows up in my Essential Graphics panel. There are two ways to add text. This was just the first way, which Adobe calls the point text. I'm going to select my V tool and I'm going to push it up a little. And I'm going to create another text box underneath. So I'm going to select my T tool by clicking T. And this time I'm going to click and drag. Now, this is called paragraph text. And the reason it's called paragraph text is because as you type, it either fits inside the box or it doesn't. If it doesn't fit inside the box, you lose your text. But if I Control A, shrink it down, and now I could continue typing. The reason it's called paragraph text is because it fits into this box. Now, of course, you could center it like this. You could kern it like this. You can use all you have other options here. This is the size. I need to select it. If I want to change the size, I need to select it. And you see, if I make it too big, words can't fit in the box, they just get dropped out. They're still there, but they're just not showing up because they're too big. Well, one thing I can do here is I can shrink the outline or make it super big. That's kind of a cool effect. Look at that. But I wanted to shrink it, so let's go ahead and shrink it. Make it more like this. Again, I'm doing Control A, Shift Control A, Command A on a Mac. And I can go ahead and select this and change the fill color. Let's get the eyedropper and fill it with the text, the color of the rocks, and fill the outline with blue. That's not great. Let's Control A, select it, and let's make it dark. Like that. There. And if I go up into my Essential Graphics panel, now I have two text boxes, which of course I can animate any way I decide to if I want. In the program monitor, we saw we have the ruler. And we have snapping turned on. It's in the view, snap and program monitor. And that allows us to snap to any ruler or guide that we bring in here. Say you want these two paragraphs to line up. These two titles, I should say. Well, then you can go like that, select my V tool, and now I can make this match. Then I can hide my guides. I don't need to show them, for example, anymore. I don't need to show my rulers anymore either. Now, when you're designing text or any type of graphics on a screen, sometimes you might want to turn on the safe margin. We had these on earlier in an earlier lesson, and that's the safe margins. Now, these are default safe margins that were designed for broadcast television. Now, if you're not creating something for broadcast television, you could probably cheat these a little bit. And the way to do that is you go to your overlay settings. We also saw this earlier, but let's just go ahead and go to your overlay settings. And down here in the title safe, action safe area, you can cheat this a little bit. And I would say maybe you could make the action safe, well, let's start with the title safe. You can make the title safe 10 and 10 and the action 5 and 5%. But now it's got the adjusted title safe, which gives you a little bit of a bigger area to work in. But I would only suggest doing that if you know that your video is only going to be shown on the web or on a digital device. Because if you're broadcasting things, you don't want this to go all the way to the edges like this. Let's say I want to adjust the drop shadow on this bottom text. All I need to do is click on it, select it, if I do Control A, by the way, when I have two text layers, it selects both of them. If I do Shift Control A, it deselects everything. With my pointer tool, if I double click on it, it selects only the one. And I want to bring the shadow in closer. So the distance of the shadow is this one right here. There. And now I can do Shift Control A. And that's a little bit better. Great tools for designing, type, and graphics inside the program monitor, right there at your fingertips. This is a great way to work. Let's say we really like what we created in terms of these styles. Let's say in particular, I like this one. I can go in my Essential Graphics panel, go down here to where it says Styles, and I can save this as a new style. So I hit Create Style, and I'll just call it Big Rocks Blue. And I'll save that. So I save this style as Big Rocks Blue. Now it's in my drop-down menu, but it also created over here in the project lesson a file called Big Rocks Blue that is a graphic style. So if I go into another sequence here, for example, where my cloudscape design was, select my V tool, select, double click on the cloudscape. I can take this preset and drop it onto my clip. And it has applied that style to this title. Now, obviously, this title is too big. I'm going to shrink it. And there you have it. I can center it. Your presets get saved in the project panel. So that's how you can save a preset and use it on a different sequence. There's another really convenient thing that you can do. If I click on my Cloudscape word, I'll double click on it, and go in my window drop-down menu, turn on text. Now that loads my text, and it loads all the text that's in this particular sequence. If I went to get my cliff sequence, it would load the text that was in that sequence. If I went to get my 1980s graphics sequence, it would load the text that was in that sequence. So let's go back to the cliff sequence. And you can edit the text here by double-clicking on it. And you can change the text here. And it updates dynamically. Pretty great. You can also do, by clicking right here, a spell check. You can choose what type of spell check you're using, and you can apply a spell check. And it will underline in red if you have a problem with this this spelling, and then you can right click on it. Sometimes it'll be able to update it. This will get better with AI, but it does point out to you that you had a spelling problem. Now we also saw how to create shapes using the pen tool. And I can just create a random shape here with my pen tool if I want to. Again, just so incredibly easy. Now remember, in the essential graphics, the position of the shape matters. So I can throw it back in the background here. If I click on my empty area, my shape has this particular style, has a blue outline and a green color. I can click on the name here and change it to background. It's always good to name your layers so that you know where they are when you go to your effects control panel. Say I wanted to animate the background here. There's my background layer. You can turn it off, turn it back on. Let's say you want this same graphic on top of another clip. Let's see if there's another clip I can use here somewhere. Let's say I wanted to apply this graphics layer to another sequence. Instead of where it says cloudscape here, I want to apply this graphics build. Well, note, if I right click and go reveal and project, it's not there, because this is an instance in Premiere where the clip only exists in the essential graphics panel, does not exist in the project panel. If I want this clip to exist in the project panel, I need to go to graphics and titles and go upgrade to source graphic. And now that this graphic has been made into a source clip, I can go to another sequence and I can drop this on to another sequence and it's going to match exactly what I created before. The only caveat is that the sequence settings need to match in both cases. This is a 1280 by 720 sequence that I created, and the original cliff sequence was also 1280 by 720. So because this graphic was built in a 1280 by 720 sequence, it will only fit into another 720 by 1280 sequence. But the cool thing is, I can extend it out if I need to. The cool thing here is that, you know, by the way, it's still there. Watch what happens if I go over and double click on the source clip, load it, and change the background color to, say, orange. Okay. So we changed it on this cliff sequence. Now, if I go to the other sequence, it also updated the change. So this is a very useful trick if you have a title graphic that you need to use in several places, in several different sequences. Save your graphic as a update to source graphic that will drop it into the project, and then you can use this as a source clip that you can drop in anywhere in your sequence, any number of times, and any changes that you make to this source clip will be updated all throughout. Now notice in my project panel, the graphic build that I made here, now it does not have to be called graphic. It can be called rocks graphic. So this rocks graphic that I built here, and I made a source clip. Notice it comes in with the label color assigned to stills. Remember, purple is the label color that I assigned to stills. And just as a reminder, your preferences is where you assign your label colors. And my stills are purple. The still preference is here, purple. So your graphic build comes in as a still, which is perfectly all right, because I know everything that's purple is basically a graphic. Whether it's a motion graphic, in this case you could make this a motion graphic, or a still, or a build. So this clip is considered just like a still. So what that means is, for example, if I delete this instance of it here, and I reapply it by dragging and dropping, notice how short it is. And I can select it in the track V2 and do X, and it's going to tell me it's exactly 4 seconds and 23 frames long. Well, since it's in a 24 frame per second sequence, this means that this graphic is 5 seconds long. So by default, the length of any graphic you create in Essential Graphics is going to be the default setting for your preferences timeline still graphic. Still image default duration 5 seconds. So since this graphics build is being considered a still, even though it can be a motion graphics, I know it's a bit confusing, but actually just think of it as a graphic. I don't think of it so much of a still, but I think of it as a graphic. This graphic is going to have a default duration of whatever you set here. So let's go to the sequence called 04 logo. And basically, we have this little graphic, and I'm just going to double click on it, load it in my text window. I'm going to change the type to Dizzy Movie, just for the sake of showing you how you can change the type. It's got a little fade up. Note the cross dissolves that have been placed at the beginning and the end of this clip. But the cool thing is this. If I go into my Essential Graphics panel and I click on Add New Item, which is this little icon right here, I can add a text, a rectangle, ellipse, polygon. Those are typical shapes. Or I can load something from a file. I can now go get my logo, which is on my desktop, and bring it in. Now this graphic is part of this graphics build. So you see it's considered part of this graphics build. Of course, I can shrink it to make it fit. And now this graphic is part of this build. So you can import a graphic from your computer, in this case a logo for example, and include it into your graphics build. I could also include a movie if I wanted to. If I had one, I'm going to bring this in. It just happens to be on my desktop. And this, you'll remember, is that monkey clip. I'm going to go ahead and shrink this. And I can put that right here as another graphics layer. How fantastic is that? And it'll play just as a graphics layer inside my graphics build. Another great trick. And you do that by clicking on New Item, and you bring it in as a new layer in your graphics build. Now let's go to the sequence called Mask, and I changed it up a little bit. I added the word green. They had ivy, the word ivy. I added the word green, and I'm also using a thicker font, so yours will look a little bit different than this. Basically, what I want to show you is how to use this word green as a mask. Now, we already saw this in the previous part of this lesson by doing a track matte. This is essentially the same thing. In the Essential Graphics panel, note my 3 layers, green, ivy, and I have another layer here that I turned off. The layer underneath is this brown layer in my sequence. So I'm going to go to my type layer, which is green, and I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom, and where it says mask with text, if I turn that on, it's going to punch a hole using green as my mask. And so now I have this effect, which is pretty cool. It's like a track matte like we did earlier. Of course, the green still is not moving, but it could be moving. It could be a movie as well. That's just the layer of ivy is not really moving right now. Or we could do some other stuff. I added another layer here called cliff, and I want to use this as my fill instead of the ivy. So if I do this and turn off the ivy, then I have a movie as a fill and not just a still. And again, this is simply by turning on mask with text. And of course, you can also invert it. And in this case, it's not great because the rocks video doesn't reach the edge of the screen, but the invert button is there that you can invert in case you wanted to invert your mask. So creating a mask with your text is as easy as clicking on this button right here. All right, so now we're going to take a look at something else. And this harkens back to the beginning of my career in TV, where one of my first jobs was to create credits or credit rolls. And back then it was took one whole machine just to roll credits. But we're going to do it really quickly here. I'm going to select the 04 logo sequence. Remember, it's got this little dizzy graphic here. We're going to go ahead and select the type tool, click in our program monitor here, and say, start to type our credits. All right, that's good enough. I don't need to type any more than that. I could decide to center the text. That's centered the paragraph, but what I need to do now is to position it on the screen correctly. So I'm going to put it back at the top. Now I'm going to deselect the text, and I'm going to go to the top of my Essential Graphics panel and deselect everything. And you have to deselect all the layers here and click on Roll. And now you have some options. You can decide how much pre-roll you want. Pre-roll is how long before the image appears on the screen. And post-roll is how long it stays off the screen. And you could turn on start off screen and end off screen. And if I play it back now, it rolls the entire graphic, which is pretty cool. Now, the speed of my roll is determined by the length of the clip. If I want the roll to be longer and slower, I just need to make my clip longer. So now my roll is slower. And as you can tell, I can include graphics inside my roll. I could even do that with the 1980s graphics. Everything deselected, select roll, start off screen, pre-roll, add maybe a second, post-roll, add a second, and then go ahead and play the sequence down, and it's going to do this. You can roll and animate a graphic. How cool is that? Believe me, it's a lot easier to roll this way than it was to roll back in the day when I had to type everything out and press special commands at just the right time so that it would roll on the screen. So this is great. Now we saw that we created a couple of pretty neat graphics here. And let's say we saw how we can make them basically source clips by going to graphics and titles, upgrade to source graphic. But we can also save them as part of our custom graphics. In the Essential Graphics panel, there are two tabs. We already saw the Edit and the Browse tab where you can download or use pre-builds that are already available to you here. But let's say I wanted to save this as my own custom pre-build. Well, you can do that too by simply clicking the clip in the timeline and go to Graphics and Titles and go Export as a motion graphics template. Now it's going to say, what do you want to call this? Well, I'm going to call it 1980s graphics, animation, exclamation point. Include video thumbnail. Where do you want it to go? Local template, folder, local drive, or my library? I'm going to load it to my library. And that's going to load it up to the cloud on my library at the Adobe Cloud. So I'm going to hit OK. It's exporting the motion graphics template, and it's going to load it to the Adobe Cloud. And it's also here in my custom templates. How cool is that? So the last thing we're going to do is to look at how we can create captions. Now, I'm not going to get into it too much, except that there is one cool feature I want to show, which is that Premiere Pro can generate its own captions automatically, which can be very useful. So we're going to go ahead and open a new lesson here. I'm going to save this one, lesson 15, work in progress 2. We've done a lot of great work here. And I will upload this lesson for you guys to poke around at. I'm going to close lesson 15, work in progress 2. And I'm going to open lesson 15-02. Note, that's not the same thing as work in progress 2. I'm going to load the sequence, the PSA.
It's your car. You take it to people you trust.
Boy, the total rebuild, you were wanting to rip out your linkage. Well, that's just an estimate.
We've got a PSA. I think this is a real PSA. PSA stands for public service announcement. Or public service ad. I don't know which one it is. But anyway, let's say that your TV station, or I don't know, even your client wants to add captions to this video. Well, instead of sitting there and typing everything out, you can do this. Open in your view and your Windows drop-down menu the text panel. In the text panel, click Transcribe Sequence. It tells you the name of the sequence. Yes, that's the one we want to transcribe. It's 30 seconds long. Yes, that's the length of an ad typically. Recognize when different speakers are talking. Yes, and let's go ahead and transcribe it. So it's doing its thing here. Now this is another function of AI which will get better in the future. So these types of tools are only going to improve in the future, which is great because you don't have to type all this text. The machine's doing the work for you. And here you go. Here's your text. And note, it allows you the opportunity to correct it, also to spell check it, right? And to correct it if you need to. So once your transcription has been done, just click on Create Captions, CC, right here. And it's going to ask you a bunch of things that you can play around with. And let's go ahead and create the captions. And now if I play it down, I'll turn off my
you take it to people
margins.
You trust.
Boy, the total rebuild,
There's my captions.
Well, that's just an
Okay, so that's the end of lesson D. I know it was a lot of information. This was a big lesson. But we learned a lot about how to create graphics and titles, compositing, keying, a lot of really important video techniques to layer video and to achieve a great result using graphics and titles and all kinds of special effects. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson, even though it was long and it contained a lot of information. And I will see you in the next lesson, Lesson E.